Auburn is trying to get on the go with recruiting these days, but to get on the go, they got an NIL Go. Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport. I'm your host, Mike G. Thank you so much for turning us up and turning us on a Tuesday. Joining me as he does every single Tuesday is my good friend Kyle Rush from The Barn. Visit them at www.thebarnauburn.com for all your message board needs. Kyle, on today's show, we're talking about NIL Go. And breaking this down for fans and explaining where Auburn's at in the second half of the show on NIL Go. But there's been a lot of talk about recruiting and why recruiting is where it is right now as it stands. I had an hour-long exclusive with John Cohen today, as a matter of fact, before the show, talking about where Auburn's at with NIL Go. To start the show, I want to just, again, if you are completely new to this and you don't understand any of this, we want to educate you. And so I'm going to start the show just kind of breaking down what it is, right? This is the new NIL Clearinghouse that is referred to as NIL Go. It was born out of the House settlement. So this is, guys, this is law. I need people to understand this. This entity has real power where the NCAA maybe did not. So, there's some things that we'll talk about later in this conversation that came out of my conversation with John Cohen about, what kind of power they have. But every deal over $600, $600 or more has to be run through NIL Go. The deals are evaluated in a 3-step process. Payer association verification. You determine whether the sponsor is actually associated with a school or not. This is very important because it decides whether that money counts towards your cap. Right? Yes. Does it have a legitimate business purpose? Right? Are you actually promoting a business, a real business? Is there a real trade for services and money going on? And then fair market compensation analysis in the second half of the show. We're going to stick here and then talk about where Auburn is at on all three of these things. Look, there are some things that happen if a deal is rejected. There are some recourse that you have via arbitration. But talk to me, man. You've been talking about this a lot lately, so you're just as informed as I am, obviously, on NIL Go. With fans freaking out about where Auburn's at in recruiting, what are your thoughts about how some of these new rules play into Auburn maybe missing out on athletes that they were targeting, and maybe not permanently, though? Once the rules start to get implemented, as a rule follower, Auburn is getting right, and other schools may not be getting it right.
Yeah, and that's been the conversation. That's been the conversation over the last several days. Why does it seem like everybody else is doing it one way and they're having success, and Auburn's doing it what they think is the right way and they're having no success? And I think that's a great conversation to have. Look, we just talked about NIL Go and what it means. And the main point of John Cohen's talk at the Ambush event last Wednesday was, look, if a school is giving out a number right now and it has NIL in it, so in other words, if a school is giving an offer to a kid and there is NIL tied into it, like he's mentioned $200,000 from rev share and $200,000 from a third party, that by definition is the school facilitating an NIL deal. And that NIL deal is going to go against the cap if the school facilitated it. But how can you not be facilitating it if you're giving them a number right now? Like if you're giving them an NIL number right now before they're even on campus, you have to be facilitating it. So I think the conversation is, okay, let's grant you that, John. Let's say you're right about that. And honestly, I do think from the letter of the law, I think he's 100% right. I don't think there is a conversation about did he interpret it wrong? I think he's following instructions that he was given, and I think he's right. The conversation to me, I guess the more how the rubber meets the road here is how a institution facilitated third-party NIL deal is defined. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, how is that going to be defined and enforced? Are collectives part of an institution now? Are boosters that have businesses? Are they part of institutions now? How is that defined? I think that's going to be the key. And is there some gray area that Auburn maybe could be playing in a little bit to have a little bit more success? But I think how this whole thing breaks down revolves around that the institution facilitated third-party NIL deal.
Here's how I see it.
Hit me with it.
If your collective, Kyle, was not operating as a completely independent entity, meaning they reach out to athletes on their own, they get no input from the coaching staff or the university, then you're probably in the clear. UCF, based on the way they interpreted how things were coming, they said, we don't even have a need for the kingdom. That was their on to victory, right? Yeah. They said, look, we're going to have the competitive success fund, which will draw from this because number one, they didn't even expect to fill that $20.5 million pot. So it's the same donors funding both things. Why even have it? And they were going to leave the prescription model in place so that you could subscribe. I'm sorry, the subscription model in place so you could subscribe, but there's no need for it, right? We just got to figure out how to get $20.5 million in this pot that they say that we have for year one. If you don't think you're going to fill it, why split the dollars, right? Keep it all under your house and in control. If you're Auburn or Alabama or Ohio State or Texas, I think you fill that $20.5 million pot like that. Easy. And then you have to figure out a way to make sure that you have enough third-party entities that are well-run enough to offer deals to athletes without your help. Yeah. And that's what it boils down to. That's the way I see it.
So it's kind of how NIL was supposed to be from the beginning.
Exactly.
Now we're just kind of right back to where we started, if you really think about it. But what's going to be really interesting to see, okay? I think what's going to be really interesting to see is when offers go on paper, which that's the August 1st date that John Cohen talks about. He's talked about for the past week or so.
That's correct.
That's when kids can get offers on paper, and you'll actually be able to see numbers on paper. If there is that 50-50 split between rev share and NIL, the NIL is not going to be part of that written offer. It's just not going to be a part of it. So is there, when the kid sees the number, hey, you said my number was 400 and now this paper says only 200, is that going to create enough rift to where they go look elsewhere? Or is it going to be like, don't worry about the other 200. We're going to take care of that. Don't worry. We can't put it on paper, but we're going to handle that. Does that reassure kids? There's so much that's going to be up in the air on August 1st and after. I will say this. John Cohen seems incredibly confident that Auburn's going to be on the right side of this.
Yeah, that's the sense I got from him during our almost hour-long conversation.
Almost arrogantly comfortable, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Almost like I'm trying to think of the arrogant has a negative connotation, but I don't mean it negatively. Almost like I know I'm right here.
He's bullish on his stance for sure. Yeah, he's really bullish on his stance, and I'm going to piss some people off with this, but hang with me, Kyle.
Yeah,
when NIL first started to come about, and Brian Harsin was the coach, he quickly got labeled the anti-NIL coach when he was specifically told to sit on his hands. You are not to have one conversation. You are not to have anything to do with this. And that is where they're headed with these third parties. If you want to claim they have you're not driving it. If you don't want it to count towards your cap, they're going to have to operate that way completely independently with no input from the university. Yeah. And they're going to have to prove to the clearinghouse, NIL Go, that is truly how they operate. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of collectives restructuring. And Auburn, I'm happy to hear, seems like they're actually ahead of the curve when it comes to interpreting what's going to be. And, quite frankly, I think some schools are going to be in hot water once their deals go back through that NIL Go meat grinder. They're going to be like, this counts to your cap, this counts to your cap, this counts to your cap. And make no mistake about it, NIL Go has real power here.
Yeah.
They can impose sanctions. They can you may be able to take a hit to your cap. They can rule an athlete ineligible. They can hit the school with fines. If you are not in compliance, this isn't some made up boogeyman that has fake authority like the NCAA has been a toothless institution at times when it comes to doling out punishment for rule breakers. They've been uneven and weirdly heavy-handed in certain areas and too light in other areas. NIL Go can come down on you.
Yeah.
And restrict the dollars that you have to spend.
Yeah. So here's my question for you, Mike. Do you think that schools, like, to me, the more and more I read about this, the more that I this is going to happen. Like, there's going to be scenarios where teams go over their cap and they're going to have to make decisions, whether they reduce how much they're paying kids or this, that, and the other. Do you think it's just the whole, hey, we're going to take our chances? We'll just take our chances and, hey, they're here, and we'll figure it out from there. Do you think that's what's happening? Like, or that's the only thing I can really come up with. Hey, we'll call your bluff. Enforce it. Let's see you enforce it. Georgia has 27 commits right now.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that cap's not exploded? There's zero chance. There's zero chance that cap is not exploded. Do you think they're just like, well, we'll call your bluff. Do what you got to do, and then we'll figure it out?
Kyle, I think there's a chance that when this is looked at in hindsight, I'm not saying just for Georgia specifically, that there are going to be some deals that get blown up and some kids that are going to be really upset that their institution gave them really bad advice. Yeah. And did some deals that are going to be ruled unexecutable. Now, look, before we move on, I want to talk about some recent comments that Hugh Freeze had at an ambush event and talking about managing the cap and how he feels like it's affected recruiting. But I do want people to understand that this is their sole mission is to maintain the integrity of the salary cap. Yeah, this is their number one goal, and to add some transparency to the process, but also provide legal means if you feel like you got a ruling that does not align with the mission of NIL Go. So lawyers are going to be involved in this. I see a lot of court cases coming. You remember what it was like with Cam in 2010. When they thought he might be suspended, and like Auburn's legal team was working overtime to make sure that anything Auburn accomplished while Cam Newton was on the field would not then subsequently be wiped out because you didn't handle the process correctly. And they came back through and said, you know what, vacating wins and you're on probation and you lose all these scholarships and you set your program back 4 or 5 years. Right. We've seen it happen. Sure. So, John Cohen as an AD doesn't want to see that happen to Auburn. I respect that mission. But also you got to deal with the realities in how it affects recruiting. We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the Auburn Express is brought to you by our friends at the Vibe Vault. You can find them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite E in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's right across the street from the Chattahoochee Valley Community College, next to Renfro's Supermarket and Marco's Pizza. The Vibe Vault. If you're in the Columbus, Phoenix City area and you're looking to get fresh for the weekend, get fresh for the weekend with the Vibe Vault. Not just barbers, lifestyle consultants. This episode of the War Rapport is brought to you by our friends at the Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORT to get 15% off that Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. Longtime sponsors of the War Rapport. You see their name everywhere, all over our content. They're doing great work. When you hit them up, make sure you let Richard know that you came from the War Rapport by using that code. Also want to thank our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. Golden's Cast Iron. The summer is here. You want to be outside around the grill or just trying to stay in shape with some Golden's Cast Iron weights. Work out, grill out, chill out with Golden's Cast Iron. How is Auburn handling this? Are they going to be on the right side of history? And what effect does it have on recruiting? At a recent ambush event, Hugh Freeze talked specific. He used the wide receiver room, Kyle, as an example and saying, hey, we like all the guys in this room. We don't want to lose anybody, but there's a cost associated with holding those guys here. Sure. And not only is there a cost associated with that, if that money that you control directly is spent on retention rather than recruiting, it is obviously going to have an effect on your future recruiting classes. And everybody who recruits at a high level, if they're going to hold their rosters together, is going to have to go through this cycle at some point. If you're abiding by the cap, right?
If you're abiding by the cap, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think that is some of what Auburn is experiencing in recruiting right now. It's the sense of what I got from my conversation with John Cohen that, look, man, Hugh Freeze said it himself. So I'm not making anything up here. He said it. He said, look, we love our wide receiver room. We don't lose any of those guys. So we didn't. We kept them and we added some pieces. That comes at a cost. Because
and then on paper, none of those guys have to leave next year. So like you could return the whole room. Like I know Eric Singleton is going to probably go to the NFL, but like literally every one of them could come back. Yeah. There's no seniors.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, those guys have at least one more year to play after next season. Look, if Cam has the type of season we think he's going to have, it's going to be a price tag associated with rewarding those accolades that he is inevitably going to get. If Perry Thompson makes the jump that I expect him to make this year, then there's going to be a cost associated with maintaining him and make sure you have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. If Jackson Arnold explodes as a college QB and you want him to return, there's going to be a cost associated with that above and beyond what his initial deal was. Kyle, welcome to pro sports, man. This is a pro sports model where you have to renegotiate contracts and all this stuff that we used to hear from fans about a deal is a deal, you got to honor a deal and all that. Well, okay, well, not anymore, because once you open the door to paying players, you open the door to all this.
100%. 100%. I want to put my fan hat on for a second. Okay. I love the idea that we're following the rules. Okay. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the idea that we're following the rules, but at the end of the day, you can be the most honorable person in the world and still get your ass beat. Excuse my language. Yeah. But at some point in time, you got to find some gray area to play in. And that's been my sort of contention this whole thing. Like, what good does it really get you if you're following the rules? Hey, we're doing what we're supposed to do, and it's not working. And everybody else seems to be having success and not checking up. Like, at some point in time, and maybe that'll be soon, maybe August 1st hits and you can make a pivot and you can kind of work a little bit of both sides of the coin. But I think that's been my biggest gripe, complaint, or whatever. It's like, it just seems like we're not really trying to be cutting edge, push the envelope. We're sticking to the rules, and I think they're right on those. I don't think they've misinterpreted anything. But man, you got a long way to climb. I know there's a long time till December, but you got a long way to climb. And I just hope that we're not like moral superioritying ourselves into a bind on the recruiting trail.
Well, I'll tell you this. Here's how I feel about it. Only hindsight will tell us whether this is the right approach or not. Because if schools start getting hammered, you're going to be very thankful that John Cohen is taking the approach that he's taking to this now. Because here's what I do know. All this talk about recruiting, and part of my French this time, it will have jack shit to do with what Auburn does in the field in 2025. So go out and win football games, and that's where the sole focus, I think, not sole focus. Let me not say that. You got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. But your main mission is always to win football games. And what I did get from Cohen is they feel like they built a very, very, very good football team.
Yeah,
and that team is going to compete this year and right now. And if they get the results, you'll see some of this resolve itself. But I have a feeling that if he's right, by mid-season, you're going to see a lot. You're going to see some recruiting classes fall apart. You're going to see a bunch of flips. You're going to see some schools not be able to deliver on the promises that they made because they took the wrong approach.
Or
that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, or they took so many that they're going to get into a spot where they're going to start releasing kids, like letting kids out of the class.
Yep.
Like we're going to keep the ones we want that get us in that number where we want to be. It is going to be nasty. It's going to be big time.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. I've said this all along. If you miss a recruit, you know what it doesn't change? Cam Coleman. If you miss another recruit, you miss another 5-star, you know what it doesn't change? Keldrick Falk.
Exactly.
You miss another 5-star, you know what it doesn't change? That DB room that's deep, and that wide receiver room that's super deep, and that offensive line that's got first-round tackle projections on it. Like, no matter what happens in recruiting, it doesn't change a daggum thing for that 2025 roster that's set up to be a pretty solid football team.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. I just want to also add that schools are going to go through cycles where they spend more money on player retention than player addition. And part of the balance of having a GM that focuses on this is making sure you're doing the right amount of both for where you're at that year. When you think about a program like a franchise like the Patriots, famous for not overpaying for players.
Right.
So much so that Tom Brady, while many years should have been the highest paid player in the NFL, was not. But him and Bill, those guys wanted to win.
Right.
They wanted to win, and they understood that to stay in the cap and go after a more well-rounded team, one person cannot suck the financial life out of the collective football room. So, guys may take a little less, but you put together an extraordinary group of people that care more about winning. Now, they're being compensated. I'm not saying they're taking pennies to play, but maybe not getting top dollar they could on an open market because they want to win. And I think that this is where the traditional tenets of recruiting come back into play, Kyle. Do you have the facilities? Do you like the school? The access to I think that this is where it comes in to maybe give you more bargaining power. Say, look, we don't have an extra $50,000 to give you, but we do have all these great things that will be at your disposal if you sign with Auburn University. Yeah. So these things still become important, correct? Yeah, I think they become important. And just because you miss on a kid, for it doesn't mean that guy could be on your roster the next fall if you miss on him in December.
Yep.
That's how crazy the game is, right?
You almost just got to go year by year. Like, let's see what team we have at the end of all the portal and recruiting and everything. Let's see what the team we have, and just go from season to season. Yeah.
It's not going to be as simple as we got a top 5 recruiting class every year. I think you're going to go through cycles where you have a low teens-ish class, but still a solid class that fills your needs. But more importantly, you spent your dollars retaining the 2 top 10 classes you recruited 2-3 years ago.
Exactly. High retention rate. Very high retention.
This is what Hugh Freeze was talking about at that ambush event. He said, look, we don't want to lose a single wide receiver out of this room, man.
Yeah, I know.
That costs money. Costs money. So,
exactly.
With all the talk about what Eric Singleton could be this year, he was a name specifically that came up in my conversation with John Cohen. Auburn, I think, is in a good place where they have a lot of talent on campus now. And once you start winning football games, you'll see, I think, some of these narratives go away. Well, once you get to that requisite number, that 9 wins season after season, and you make a couple of playoffs and you perform well, I think a lot of this talk goes away. There's just a high level of freak out right now in the fan base. Auburn is like 80-something in recruiting, but they're forgetting this is a really good football team that they assembled in the first 2 years. Now that you got Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson and Malcolm Simmons and Bryce Kane and Eric Singleton and Horatio Fields, you can't go out and promise a kid what you promised those guys when they came in.
Exactly.
You can't.
Exactly.
And the rules have changed even since those guys signed around the money. Closing thoughts, man. In your mind, do you think Auburn is in the right place right now as far as NIL Go is concerned? They're a serious deal with serious power that could seriously wreck your program if you don't follow these very, very, very serious guidelines.
By the letter of the law, 100%. By the letter of the law, I think 100%. There's really no argument otherwise that Auburn's misinterpreting something. Okay. Now, I think Auburn could be doing a little bit better in the gray area. Okay.
Sure.
I take that for what it is. I think Auburn could be doing a little bit better in the gray area, and maybe they're waiting on that. Maybe they're waiting on once these deals start being put in writing and things like that. I don't think there's an excuse to be 85th in recruiting. I think you could probably have not lost a couple of kids and maybe got a few more kids at this point in time. But at the same token, I think Auburn could be performing a little bit better in that gray area than what they are currently. And again, that could change August 1st. That switch could flip, and they may have a mechanism in place for that. But other than that, I think you're not going to have to worry about anything legal that Auburn's going to mess up on. And I think they're going to be ready and waiting in case when numbers don't start materializing the way that they're being promised, Auburn's going to be there and saying, hey, I told you so. And we've been consistent the whole time. So will that play out in Auburn's favor? We'll just have to wait and see.
I will tell you, there are some notable SEC programs well outside the top 25 in recruiting right now. It is not just Auburn. I can't speak to what their potential hurdles are. So I'm not sitting here. I'm just saying when you look at it, it's plausible to think there's something broader here that's going on, because it's not like everyone's killing it in recruiting and it's just Auburn that's down to 80 something. I think that's just about numbers at this point. If you're Auburn, right, you only have like 7 commits in the class. So, of course, your class is going to be down there versus a team that's got 15 or more commits in the class, unless you're 7 or all 5 stars. But certainly, I just believe, Kyle, you're going to see some of these schools come back to the field. And if a school does not, it's not as simple as just looking at their recruiting ranking and say they're doing better than you. You have to look at the cycle they're in. How much attrition are they experiencing year over year? How much money are they having to spend on player retention versus player addition, right? If you have a senior-laden team with a bunch of guys that are returning, now it's reasonable to think that you may not be bringing in a top 10 recruiting class that year. The NFL equivalent that I would have, it would be like, hey, when you're doing really well and you got a bunch of guys coming back, you probably fielded a pretty good team and you're not going to get the first pick in the draft.
Correct.
Right? The rules are designed to create parity.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Auburn only lost, 2 kids out of that 2024 class this offseason?
Remarkable.
Which is pretty crazy. And then even in the half class, there was a couple of guys that I'm not even going to count because they were more disciplinary than anything. But I think you only lost like 6 or 7 from that half, what I call a half class. So you're hitting on kids and you're retaining them. And that's going to cost money. That's going to cost money. It's going to, and they're here for a long time too. So it's going to cost money for a while.
Yeah, my message to fans is you can no longer just look at that number next to the recruiting ranking and say they're doing better than you. They may just be in a cycle where they're spending more money on player additions versus player retention. And that's the choice. This is the choice that they have to make, that Hugh Freeze was trying to explain to people. And I felt like his message wasn't heard. I thought he explained it fine. But that's why we, the media, do these segments to fill the gaps and bring people back and say, hey, look, he said this. This is what he meant. If you're looking, you're saying Auburn doesn't have a high profile receiver in the room right now. Well, the game has changed. You may not, you can't just stack 5-star receivers year after year after year and pay all those guys and make it happen that way. So great conversation, Kyle, as always, man. I appreciate your diligence in you. I mean, you've done a few segments on this You're as informed as anybody I know on the goings and comings of NIL at Auburn. I hope this is a conversation that we continue in the future, guys. That's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Rapport. Do us a favor, if you're in the comments after the video, smash that super thanks button. Show us some love. We are the War Rapport on every social media platform. So hit like and subscribe. Help keep us going. We'll be live from SEC Media Days next week, bringing you guys lots of great content. Guys, we're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.